Years ago, one of my mentors made the distinction between simply preaching and actually ministering to people. He told me people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. When I became a full time youth and family minister, I realized how inadequately prepared I was for dealing with the complex challenges facing youth, parents, and families. I honestly cared, but I was not competent. Today's ministers can become better equipped to meet this challenge through the Master of Arts in Family Life Ministry offered by Faulkner University. This program integrates prevention oriented strategies as well as intervention strategies within a church setting, focusing on counseling skills. All these courses may be completed online from the convenience of your home or workplace and at a time that is convenient to the schedule of the student. There is a 50% discount for the members of the Church of Christ. Now, although this program is not designed to fulfill any requirements toward becoming a licensed counselor, it is designed to thoroughly equip the minister by providing courses including but not limited to the skills required for counseling couples, families in crisis, as well as dealing with family dynamics, human intimacy, sexuality, parent and character education, as well as church assessments. If you're interested in more information, contact faulkner.edu/KGST. That is faulkner.edu/KGST. KGST stands for Curley Graduate School of Theology. You can also contact graduate enrollment at faulkner.edu with any questions or to explore the eligibility requirements for the tuition discount. Graduate enrollment at faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. It started at a yard sale and it ended in a ditch and a funeral procession. I was looking for a big nylon bag to put ropes in. I had this collection of small sections of rope that I'd gotten from Pigeon Mountain Industries. A friend of mine knew a dealer for PMI, and I would use these small sections of rope when I taught a class. If I were teaching a rappelling class or teaching a ropes course class, we would teach people how to tie ranger harnesses with the ropes. We'd teach them how to set up an anchor. We'd teach them how to tie a clove hitch and a figure eight. And it was just something that we did, in our classes and our activities. And I wanted a way to organize all these ropes so I'd have something to put them in. And so Tim Orbison and I were at this yard sale, and I found this bag, and I looked at it, and the dimensions were good, and it was heavy and had a big, thick plastic zipper. And so I walked over to the lady and said, "Hey, I'll give you $25 just for this bag." And she said, "Okay." I said, "Now there's something in the bag." She said, "No. Everything goes. The bag and all the contents. That's your problem now." I guess they were trying to clear some stuff out. And so with bag in hand, we left. Well, it turns out what was in the bag was a parachute. And not just any parachute, but apparently an emergency chute. Now, this was during the days that Tim was fledgling in his pilot days, and so I thought, hey, it'd be more practical for you to have a parachute than me. I'm not going to use a parachute rock climbing, and so I'm going to leave you with the chute, and maybe you can rig it on your plane or your ultralight or whatever it is you're trying to learn to fly, and it may save your life one day. Tim is inquisitive to the point of being impulsive. He's very mechanically adept. He's very mechanically inclined. And not only does he like to know how things work, he likes to let you know he's figured out how things work. So I leave him to play with this densely packed package that obviously contains a parachute, and I go home. And it wasn't an hour, and the phone rang. And I answered the phone, and I'm immediately being yelled at. "Hey, man, I opened that chute. It had an explosive charge that drug it into the air to help it deploy." "Tim, why are you yelling at me?" "Am I yelling? I can't tell that I'm yelling. I just don't hear so well right now." I immediately drove over to see the newly deployed chute. And on my arrival, I was aghast at how close my friend had come to having this thing thread him like a needle. The thing that I'd given him, hoping to save his life, had nearly killed him. The evidence of the burned black patch in his utility trailer bore the evidence that had he been bent over just a little more and maybe to the right or to the left, when this thing detonated, the chute and the metal cylinder would have driven right through his sternum. You see, the way this chute worked was instead of having a little drag chute that you throw out or a ripcord that you pull or being attached to a static line, this thing had an explosive charge. And when he set it off, you get this massive explosion, and this metal stainless steel cylinder that probably weighs a pound shoots out, dragging the top of the chute with him, so it can deploy. Now, I call this thing a drogue. That's probably not the appropriate term for it, but this is the best term I've got. Tim had nearly been killed by a quarter-size cylinder made out of stainless steel being powered by an explosive charge. If you watch the YouTube video, not of the actual event, but of this podcast, you'll see on the guest shelf behind me, Mr. Roboto is looking over the actual cylinder itself. I've kept it all these years. Well, I've got my nylon bag, and my nylon bag does what my nylon bag is supposed to do, but Tim has a parachute. And there are so many cool things you can do with a parachute. So we began to explore, what some of our options was. In fact, Tim came up with this thing where he had a freestanding brace, and he would put an airplane motor on it with a prop, and he would turn it on and blow air into the parachute and let kids, jump into the air and play with it. And they take it to like a community fair in the parking lot and let people play with the force of the wind being caught in this chute. Well, we wanted to figure out if we could do something other than make it a community fair attraction. So I'm at his house early one spring day, and we're in the front yard, and we're trying to figure out, exploring the things yet undone with the parachute. It was a bit windy, and I would hold the lines and let the wind fill the canopy. And then when we got enough wind in the canopy, I would jump up into the air, and it would float me down to the ground. And I'd never been able to catch air, literally and figuratively. I'd never been able to jump that high, but the wind was assisting me with the parachute. And then because the canopy caught air, I was floating to the ground and not jarring my knees and my hips when I landed. Well, on one of my particular jumps, I caught a stronger breeze. And this breeze was not intermittent. It was steady. It filled the canopy, and it started dragging me across the lawn. And Tim says, "Hey, don't let go of the chute. It'll end up in the power line." So I'm holding onto the parachute, and it's dragging me across the lawn, and there's no way to stop. And I'm being dragged across the lawn like I'm skiing behind a boat. I'm being towed along behind this parachute when I look up, and to my dismay, turning off of Ryland Pike and onto Gurley Pike is a sheriff's deputy. Is a sheriff's deputy, and his lights are blinking. And the sheriff's deputy is leading a funeral procession, because behind his car is the hearse, the pallbearers, the mourners, and the congregants. And here I am about to be dragged across the road in front of them. Tim is standing in the yard yelling, "Oh no, oh no," and look out. Now, I'm not saying that this is a funeral that we should have attended. I'm not saying it's a funeral that we skipped. I mean, it wasn't like they'd ask us to preside or eulogize. What I am saying is it may have been proper pastoral decorum would have dictated that it would have been more prudent for us to attend the funeral than to sabotage it with a bad scene from The Dirty Dozen. Now, in my ability to process things on a linear basis, facts, physics, and consequences, I see the schematic clearly drawn out in my mind of this chute dragging me in front of the deputy, who in turn runs over me like a paragliding armadillo and thus drags me down the pavement. And coupled with my desire not to be identified by the aforementioned deputy, funeral director, pallbearers, attendees, and mourners, I just don't want them to know that I'm involved in this project. Now, I'm not sure skipping a funeral is a fireable offense. I'm not sure skipping a funeral is something that will keep them from hiring you, but I'm very sure that horizontal paragliding into the procession, that may be something where they choose not to hire you as their youth minister, or they may fire you if you are their minister, but we'll never know, because I ditched it. I bailed out. I let go of the parachute, barrel rolled into the ditch, and attempted to become one with the earth, allowing the chute to billow across the funeral procession like a Dementor. all the while leaving Tim Orbison standing in the yard, mouth agape, only to wave peacefully at the deputy, the funeral director, the pallbearers, the funeral attendees, and the mourners. One does not abandon their friends. And in the 40 plus years that I've known Tim Orbison, we've never abandoned each other in any situation. Okay, well, maybe the hornet's nest, but that doesn't count. When he shot that thing with the 44 Magnum, he didn't really abandon me. He just beat me to the car and then locked the doors. Like hornets can open doors. It's silly. Anyway, we've had this friendship for these years. It's sort of a Kirk and Spock relationship. Now, Tim's a big Star Trek fan, and he thinks he's Kirk, but he's not. He's Spock. I'm Kirk. But when I write Tim a handwritten letter, I end all the letters that I write to him with a quote from Spock. Even though I'm not Spock, I'm Kirk. But I leave the quote as, "You have been and shall always be my friend." Tim and I have been in lots of bad situations. We face them together as ministers. We face them together as friends. We've dealt with things that our children have gone through. We've dealt with things that each other's gone through. And we've stood with and by and for each other. But in this case, on the day of the parachute funeral procession, I left him alone in the yard and I was hiding in a ditch. I didn't stand with him. I guess I was embarrassed. I didn't want to be identified. And who cares that the assumption can be made that I'm your first choice when it comes to these kind of ridiculous shenanigans? You know, anybody with any sense at all goes, hey, if something like this is going on and Tim's involved and there's another person involved, it's either going to be Lonnie Jones, because most of his other friends are pretty straight-laced. But the fact remains that friends stand together. And he was the only one standing there in that yard. And not because I couldn't stand. It's not because I wouldn't stand. I just didn't stand. And I should have stood up. I should have stood with him and I should have stood by him. I just simply should have stood. Now, this is basically an inconsequential thing, and nobody was deeply offended, and our friendship was unaltered by our humorous failure. And I'm being a little bit hyperbolic using this as the example, but it makes a good example. You see, I'm not sure who said we win as a team and we lose as a team. But I don't believe anybody believes that anymore in the modern era, and you spell that E-R-A or E-R-R-O-R, in the modern era of the NIL mentality. We want all the accolades, but none of the accountability. We want to stand up for the praise and the trophy and the ring, but not for the difficulty or the correction. You see, the value of a friend, the value of a spouse, the value of a partner, or the value of a teammate is not how well they share when things are good and easy and fun and you get the glory, but whether or not their loyalty extends to or transcends above and keeps us standing when it's bad, hard, difficult, embarrassing, unforgivable, humiliating, and awkward. You see, when it's a matter of consequence, when things are out of control, are you surrounded by people who stand with you, for you, and beside you? I've witnessed what happens when people are accused and persecuted and even prosecuted, and how quickly they will be left standing alone while others hide, as it were, in the nearest ditch. In matters that matter, are you a person who has people who won't ditch you? But more importantly, are you the person others can count on to stand with them, for them, and beside them, and you won't ditch them? I don't know who made the quote, but there's a famous quote that says there are no atheists in foxholes. Well, I don't believe your friends, your true friends, I don't believe you find them in ditches. Using the tool of shortwave radio, World Christian Broadcasting literally covers the world every day with the gospel. They use 2 large curtain antennas. One is located in Anchor Point, Alaska, and the other in Madagascar. They send out messages that are recorded at their international home in Franklin, Tennessee. They make available 40 hours of broadcast every day. The broadcasts are made in English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, Korean, English for Africa, and Arabic. They would love for your group to visit them. You can bring your ladies group, your youth group, or your men's group. Just give them a call at 615-371-8707, 615-371-8707, or you can go to worldchristian.org, find the Donate Here button, and make a financial contribution to support this work that literally covers the world every day with the gospel. World Christian Broadcasting, in cooperation with Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. The Jack Zorn Scholarship is named after the founder of Lads to Leaders, who is also a Faulkner alumnus. This scholarship is meant to help address the minister shortage in the churches of Christ. It provides a completely free tuition to qualified students who are majoring in either Bible or ministry and are committed to becoming a minister after graduation. Applicants who have been accepted for admission and completed all scholarship requirements by December the 15th each year will receive priority consideration. You can apply for this at faulkner.edu and click Apply Now. Faulkner.edu, click Apply Now, or for more information and a review of the requirements, visit faulkner.edu/Zorn, Zorn, faulkner.edu/Zorn, or contact admissions at faulkner.edu. Faulkner University is a sponsor of Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure. Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure, is sponsored by us. What? We sponsor ourselves? Is that even legal? Check us out on Amazon. You can have access to the titles of Pedagogue, the youth ministry book by Lonnie Jones, Cognitive Spiritual Development, a Christ-centered approach to spiritual self-esteem, Grappling with Life, Controlling Your Inside Space, a small essay using the principles of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to talk about psychological and emotional self-defense, If I Were a Mouse, a children's book written and illustrated by Lonnie Jones, and then The Selfish Reel, a very short story about a decision. Also, you can check out our YouTube channel to see archived lessons and presentations from across the country, some videos with rope tricks and knots. Don't forget to visit the Facebook page, 550 Guys, to learn about the little rope men that we make and that we invented and that we make. And then be sure to click like, subscribe, and share. This is Keeping Up with Jones, the Lonnie Jones podcast adventure.